Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's Digital Water Expert session, Race to October, LCRR Inventory and Looking Ahead. My name is Jay Nelson, and I'm the head of marketing here at Trinnex, and I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you for joining today and start by covering a few key items. Today will be about an hour-long session, and it is being recorded, so you will all get a copy sent to you following today's session. We encourage you to submit your questions and poll responses to our panelists, Da and Aaron, today. We'd love to understand where you, the audience, are in your digital water journey. And this is a big reason why we host these sessions. We aim to build community through providing practical viewpoints, innovation tips, and also give you a chance to get all of your questions answered. So I'd like to request all attendees today, please submit your questions using the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen to ask questions directly to our speakers today. This helps us stay organized so that we can track all of your questions coming in and answer as many of those that we can live today. We may not get to all of those questions live, but go ahead and ask away. We'll do our best to respond to each question personally, either live during today's session or in a personalized follow-up after we wrap today's presentation. Okay, with that, let's get started. First, I'd like to inform the audience that today's webinar is part one in a two-part series. By registering for this event, you'll also be registered for our follow-up event on June 18th, Simplifying Procurement for LSL Inventory, Software, and Services. This is a special session where we will be joined by Sourcewell. And Sourcewell has been empowering government since 1978. Throughout North America, they offer a cooperative purchasing program to streamline the public procurement process. On behalf of 50,000 participating agencies, Sourcewell conducts competitive solicitations, awarding the most responsive and responsible suppliers. So Trinnex was recently awarded a Sourcewell contract for lead service line software and services, following a rigorous request for proposal process, resulting in contracts that meet or exceed local procurement requirements. So please keep an eye out for the calendar event for that event, our next session. And if you'd like to learn more about that or forward to any of your colleagues, please go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen here and you'll see more details about that event. Da, who is joining us today, will also be presenting on that one. So looking forward to hearing more from you, Da. Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce the speakers for today's event. Da Yu and Aaron Engelhardt, thank you guys for joining us today. Da is a professional engineer with 12 years of experience in the water and wastewater industry. At Trinnex, Da is a sales engineer and focuses on connecting the water wastewater industry with technology. Da is passionate about data science and learning about its applications in the water and wastewater industry. And prior to Trinnex, Da worked as a consulting engineer and has experience designing a 200 MGD pump station and leading various master planning projects. And Da currently resides in Cincinnati, Ohio. Da, great to have you here today. Love talking to you about this kind of stuff. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Jay. My pleasure.
We also have Aaron Engelhardt with us here today. Aaron is a product management specialist at Trinnex, a technology company where we are focused on providing software solutions to water utilities. Aaron works closely with utilities, subject matter experts, and the software development team here to ensure that our software offerings meet customer and market needs. Prior to working at Trinnex, Aaron spent several years working as a civil engineer and is a licensed professional engineer. He has a Bachelor and Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Ohio State University. Aaron, super glad to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk through this today. Thank you.
Great. Let's go ahead and cover today's agenda briefly. So today, we'll start by getting just a brief overview of who Trinnex is and our mission in this space. Next, Da and Aaron will cover key aspects of the LCRR and proposed LCRI in the context of an ongoing race to the October deadline and beyond. Finally, we'll cover how leadCAST as a software solution can help you get ahead and stay ahead in this race. So buckle up and rev up your engines. It's going to be a great discussion today. So let's start with the Trinnex overview. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Trinnex team if this is not your first event joining us, but in case that it is, I'd like to share a little bit about who we are. Trinnex helps infrastructure leaders advance their digital journey through proven processes, software tools, and consulting partnership. Our team has decades of water industry domain knowledge, data science expertise, and an unmatched commitment to technical software excellence. We deliver innovation that is backed by this experience. Our team consists of digital water industry leaders with a proven history of bringing products to the market that our clients love. We've been in this industry long enough to be experts in the field. We're agile enough to pay direct attention to your needs in the audience here today. And we are ambitious enough to deliver the next generation of technology that will help you in your day-to-day. Ultimately, this uniquely positions Trinnex to deliver software designed by water experts for water experts like yourselves in the audience today. The Trinnex solution we'll reference today is leadCAST, and it's the only all-in-one lead and copper rule compliance software that is designed to help you in the race to October LCRR inventory deadline and beyond. And with that, Da, I'll pass it over to you to introduce our first audience poll.
Thank you, Jay. Well, as we start this conversation, we would love to know in the audience, you who are here, where you are with your LCRR journey. This would really help us understand the status and also help you know who you are, who of those you are working, right? How are you among your peers? So as you are putting the poll answers into the window, we wanted to start a little conversation. So Aaron, our theme today is race. We chose this topic because we truly believe LCR is a long race instead of a short sprint. But among the two of us, you are the one who have experience with race. I only love Formula One, and they drive really fast, but that's all I do. So, but I heard you run half marathon. Tell me about it, Aaron.
Yeah, I've run a few half marathons, so familiar with that race concept. Last one I ran was a few months ago, and it started out great, was kind of grooving along, had a lot of spring in my step, and then hit this hill and really slowed me down a lot. Had to walk for a little bit. It was a little bit disappointing. It was a good race experience overall, but wasn't quite as prepared as I could have been. And I think that this is kind of a good analogy for LCRR compliance, because the preparation really is going to dictate how we're feeling on October 16th and beyond, whenever we're completing the race. So that was a recent experience I had with the half marathon, and now I'm of course adjusting my training plan for the next one so that I have an easier race next time.
You kind of want to know what you're getting into so you can train and plan ahead rather than just getting hit by a hill and then be out of breath.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that seems like a good plan. And it's certainly true for LCR and LCRI compliance. We'll get into that in a little bit. Let's see, still waiting to get some poll results in. Jay, whenever you're ready, feel free to announce the poll results.
Great.
Love to
Thank
see
you,
where our audience are.
Yeah, we've got a lot of really good responses here too. So I'll go ahead and share the results here. Looks like a really good spread. So about 20% of folks has said they're almost finished and most unknowns are cleared. So congratulations, that's great progress. Majority of the respondents had said that you're progressing, but we'll still have some unknowns in October. So glad that you're here and with us today. I think we'll get you some really good tips to address that. And then we had a few folks say that they have a plan and are getting started soon. That's good to hear. And then some who are still starting that planning process. So really good spread. I think you're all in the right place, and we'll have a lot of good information for you today to help you progress in your journey, no matter where you are and how you responded to that poll. So thank you, Da. I'll go ahead and close it out.
Thank you, Jay.
So no matter how you answered that question, you can probably relate to a lot of the feelings that are present on the slide, that feeling of a little bit of being overwhelmed, overworked, maybe with some of the regulations that are surrounding lead and copper rule. I know whenever I talk to our clients and partners, a lot of people feel like these new regulations, they're really burdensome. They're making a lot of demands on my time and on my resources. But the past few years, while these regulations have been increasing, my budget hasn't been increasing and my own resources haven't been increasing. So I'm trying to do more with less or more with the same amount, and it's overwhelming. I know you talk to our customers and partners every day. Do you hear similar things from them?
Yeah, Aaron. Not only I think the resources for some utilities are not increasing, they are actually decreasing. So I know this one utility in the Southeast, they have about 5 to 10 positions open, trying to sort of enlarge their field crew team, actually just go back to the 10 they had before. They only have like 3 or 4 left. And that they're not able to hire these positions. On top of that, GIS specialists just left, so now they're left in true limbo. That said, not only staff is a challenge. I also know another utility, Aaron, who might be in the audience. We don't know, but we spoke last year about some of the ways to tackle the unknowns, and at that time, right, the utility was confident they can perform field verifications, but come this year, right, the staff is overworked, too much overtime. Literally, they said, we are tired, so we want to do something like predictive modeling. We'll talk about that. So these are the challenges, right? Like you said, just not many resources. And frankly, for LCRR, there's just a lack of data to answer all these questions that the EPA wants. So you're right about that.
Yes, definitely an overwhelming time. And
on top of that, there's also LCRI coming, right? That was the Thanksgiving gift we were given last year. Take us there, Aaron. Tell us what it says.
Absolutely. So the LCRI, I think of this as kind of the successor or next stage of the lead and copper rule. The I stands for improvement, so it's lead and copper rule improvements. And some of the key takeaways from the announcement from the EPA is that there's going to be a replacements mandate. So that's going to require all lead and GRR lines to be replaced within 10 years of the effective date of the rule. We're predicting that to be about 13 years from now, just for time frame reference there. There's also going to be a continuing inventory. So this October, don't get too excited that this is your last inventory ever, because more than likely it's not going to be. And that updated inventory is going to also require that connectors be included in that. There's additionally going to be some updates to water quality sampling timeframes and some of the...
Hold on a second, Aaron. You said connectors. So that's gooseneck and pigtail, which was not required in LCRR, correct?
Correct. Yes. So this is a new requirement. It's going to require obviously more work by the utilities out there and their verifications, whether that's in the field or through records.
Yeah.
So a new component that needs to be included in this inventory.
Yeah, I just want to sure we all hear that correctly. It was a surprise when we saw that. Well, it wasn't a surprise, but certainly it's certainly going back a little bit, right, on what's required.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third component, additional water quality sampling requirements. So some changes to the timelines and minutia there. And then also with public engagement, utilities are going to be required to do more outreach, more tracking, and more data wrangling for how they're talking to their residents and communicating with them. Mm-hmm. So, we've talked about the marathon theme a little bit here, that race theme. You can see that through the next several years, there's going to be more and more work ahead. I know you have a nice kind of timeline that walks us through where we're at and where we're going with LCRR and LCRI.
Yeah, sure thing. As we use this race theme, we are considering really a few things that I think will concern a utility. So I'm reading this book now called 4 Disciplines of Execution. So in that book, it basically talks about how to meaningfully execute on important items while not being all sucked in by the day-to-day. So we all have the whirlwind of day-to-day work, right? Just at the utilities, keep things running, if pipe breaks, we got to respond to them. Hopefully, no boil notice, water notice. I know some of the utilities in the south are struggling with that. But if we just lift our head a little bit and see beyond the October this year, we will see the requirements that are ahead of us. And if we look critically at them, I think we should be able to identify some critical items we can tackle today or in the near term in order to avoid extra work in the future. So here's a timeline. On the very left, we are here in the green dot. October 2024 is right ahead of us. But what we've done or what's before October 2024 in LCR is a lot less actually than what's coming afterwards. The next important date is October 2027. Like Aaron said earlier, annually the inventory needs to be submitted. Annually, utilities need to send notifications to every resident who has unknown lead or GRR. Then there's more to come. Disturbance requirements, right? Sampling starts, school and daycare, and also replacement program will start. There's a lot of requirements here that will be critical. And that year, 2027, will set the tone for you for the next 10 years. What you have done in these 3 years between 24 and 27 will determine your future 10 years. We'll get into all that, but obviously, eventually, right, by 37, as the proposed LCRI states, every unknown shall be identified and all lead lines or GRR galvanized required placement will also need to be replaced. A lot of work ahead of us. So we have thought through this critically, and we want to present to you a way to look at it that will tackle the critical item and offer some thoughts about what the best way is to go about it. Aaron, we separated this sort of 13-year race into 3 laps. Take us to the first lap, please.
Absolutely. So lap 1 is going to be this October 16th. It's probably a date you all have committed to memory at this point. Been working towards this for a while, I hope. And this will be kind of our first lap, like Dot said. We're going to look at a kind of a tale of 2 cities here as we go through these next few slides and see how the future might look for a utility that took a proactive path in tackling their unknowns versus utility that was a little bit more reactive and didn't tackle their unknowns. And we'll see that unknowns is kind of one of the key points of this whole LCRR and LCRI journey. So if we look at 2021, we can see both of these utilities, they're just getting started in their program. They both have 20,000 unknowns. Utility A, our proactive utility, they start knocking down those unknowns. So they're going out doing field verifications, perhaps doing some predictive modeling, and they're eliminating those unknowns. So we see in 2022, they've eliminated some of those unknowns, kind of pulled a little bit closer to that finish line. The utility B in the yellow car, they're still at the 20,000 unknowns. They haven't done any work on tackling unknowns yet. Whenever we get to 2024, this is when some of the differences really become evident. So that utility A, the blue car, they have knocked out half of their unknowns. So they got 10,000 unknowns verified and 10,000 unknowns left in their system. That means come October 2024, whenever we have to do notifications for unknown lead and GRR lines, they're gonna have to send out 10,000 letters to notify those residents that their line is unknown.
And not only so, Aaron, this your line is unknown. Here's the here's the impact if it's lead, and it's just not a pleasant letter to send out, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially today, in the internet era, right? News spreads quickly through neighborhoods, neighborhood Facebook groups, Nextdoor,
Nextdoor, yeah.
Yes, all of the apps that let people kind of chatter. So it can be a little bit of a public reputation risk as well, which is another reason on top of the cost to eliminate unknowns. So yeah, as I mentioned, we've seen this blue utility knock out half their unknowns. So they're sending 10,000 letters. That's still an expense. It's still a public reputation risk, but it's a lot less of a risk than the yellow utility that has to send out 20,000 letters, has that much more chance of kind of the PR mill starting up, and residents being concerned, and a lot of outreach and whatnot could be happening. So we see already the importance of tackling unknowns in lap 1, but in lap 2, it becomes even more evident why it's important to tackle unknowns. So Doc, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, lap 1 is lap 1. We are already close to the finish line. So it is what it is, right? Between now and October, what we can achieve is limited. But let's look at lap 2. Lap 2 is the next 3 years. So following Aaron's thread of thought, the tale of two utilities, right? So utility A, the bar on the left continues to progress to go from 10,000 unknowns in October this year to, let's say, 0 unknowns in 3 years. It's a lot of work to get it down to 0, but I will explain why that's worth it. Then the utility yellow, let's say that have 20,000 unknowns. And we hear this a lot. I hear utilities say, yeah, the LCR manager saying my director isn't really concerned about this, but I think in October this year, once we send out the letters, everybody will be talking about this, and I will get a lot more support and attention. Well, if that's the scenario, maybe starting in October this year, the yellow utility B, start to field verify some unknowns, thinking in 10 years, I will get rid of all of them, right? 2,000 a year, in 10 years, we are done. But what would the journey be like in 2027? Well, in 2027, the blue utility who, let's say, successfully tackled all the unknowns, have 0 unknowns. If they have no known lead or GRR, whether it's done by predictive modeling or another tool, they're finished. They're finished in the sense that their inventory is done, and they will not have no unknown notifications going forward. The 10% replacement will be 0, and you do not have to respond to requests of sampling by unknowns anymore, and you don't have lead or galvanized. Now, if a utility finishes all the unknowns and still have lead or galvanized, well, you might still do these things, but that's much reduced work. We'll explain in greater detail using the yellow utility what the work looks like. If they have 18,000 unknowns in 2027, well, the disturbance requirements kick in. That is, every time you shut off, you turn a valve, shut off water to a resident, you're going to have to tell them, hey, we disturbed you, act like it's lead that has been disturbed. So you send them flushing instructions in point of use filters. I've received them from my utility here. There's nothing than a point of use filter that tells me more my water is not safe. And then you have to respond to the sampling requests by any residents. Any of the 18,000 could request sample. Hello, utility, I want my water tested since I received your letter, right? And you're responsible.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? You said anybody that has an unknown or lead or GRR can request water sampling from the utility.
Yeah, it almost sounds unbelievable, but let's say, rumors are spreading on Facebook and people say, oh, my water, I want to make sure my water doesn't have lead. I have a baby at home. They can call the utility, and as the proposed LCRR is written, Aaron, the utility is responsible of taking these samples and do the analysis and report back to the customers what their results are. At that point, it's not your choice anymore. It's their choice, right? Whether they want to test it. So that could be a lot of work depending on who your residents are.
Absolutely. That could be a huge burden.
Could be. And that's, again, based on the number of unknowns. It's kind of like your unknowns will give you more homework coming 2027. The unknowns will also give you another huge homework. The 10% replacement rate. You may have heard of this, right? If you have 18,000 unknowns plus, let's say, 2,000 lead and galvanized, 20,000 in total, 10% of that, which is 2,000, need to be replaced every year. Among the 18,000 unknowns, you might not even have 1,000 or two lead or galvanized. So that is a compliance risk. And certainly you still have to do notifications year after year. So that's the lap 2. How you finish lap 2 will determine how you do lap 3. And when we say how you finish lap 2, we really mean how you handle the unknowns during lap 2. So with that said, Aaron, can you take us to the finishing lap, lap 3?
Absolutely. So lap 3, that's going to be the next 10 years after the LCRI effective date. Again, we're kind of anticipating as an October 2027 timeline. So this will take us to 2037. And during this time, if you have lead or GRR, you're going to be tackling those replacements. And meanwhile, doing all of the work that Da just laid out around sampling, notifications, disturbance requirements, so on and so forth. So we can see how that utility on the left in blue, they knocked out all their unknowns. Maybe they have some lead and GRR left to tackle, but they're able to really concentrate on that work during this 10-year period and focus just on replacements and not have to worry as much about all of these kind of add-on effects that unknowns can bring into the equation. Because like let's be honest here, getting rid of or doing the replacements themselves, that's enough work. That's going to be quite a bit of coordination and data to wrangle on its own. So trying to do that on top of managing all of these sampling requests and disturbance requirements and notifications for unknowns that might not even be lead, it would be a ton of work to try to manage all of that at once. So again, that really illustrates that importance that lap 2 is really going to set us up for success in lap 3, because as I said, that blue car, they can now focus on the task at hand, doing their replacements, and they'll be able to finish that up on time, maybe even ahead of schedule, and be in a much better position than the yellow car in this scenario.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And I think as I look at this, if you take anything, just one thing away, what we really want to communicate here is, if we lift our head up and look at the requirements to come and really the future work and life, for over 13 years, what a critical component that can make life easier is to reduce the unknowns dramatically by 2027. There are a few tools to help you get there and be more like the blue utility. And it's not, certainly, it's not certainly all done all over if we still have unknowns by 2027, but we should certainly spend a lot of energy and time reduce it. That is a critical component to the success and a good race in LCRR.
Absolutely. So Da, I know you know some techniques for how we can be maybe more positioned like that blue car, eliminate as many unknowns as possible so that 2027 and beyond, we're running that final lap as efficiently and easily as possible. So maybe can you walk us through one of the best tools for that?
Sure, will do. One of the best tools to help utilities reduce unknown is predictive modeling. It certainly has certain details that we need to look at so that you know whether it applies to you. And certainly it doesn't apply to every single utility, right? But we will talk through some of them. As I said earlier, a utility in Southeast in Florida actually called and said, "Da, our team is tired. We do a lot of overtime. We don't want to do that anymore." I didn't say that in the call when they said they want to predict modeling, right? They have about 5,000 remaining unknowns. But what it is true is that if that same utility have strategically looked at all their unknowns and calculated ahead of time the efforts and the cost in the two different options, right? Doing just field digging, Aaron, and also compare the cost and effort of predictive modeling. It would have been apparent, I think, predictive modeling would be a better option. Now, in Florida, for those who are in Florida, the complication was that the state did not approve predictive modeling early on. It did in January this year. So for any state who approved predictive modeling, it is really something you should consider. Here's why. This is a AWWA report, white paper style report published by AWWA based on previous project costs. So we looked at, right, how much on the top historical records would cost and the accuracy of it through previous project data. The records would be, Aaron, in this case, drawings or tab cards, right? We've seen utilities have a lot of tab cards. That has a mixed resulting accuracy. Obviously, it's lower cost. Aaron, I've talked to a utility in Minnesota. They their tab cards, it turns out that their tab cards are incorrect about 15% of the time. And a good chunk of that 15% is incorrect in the wrong direction, which means the tab card says non-lead, and the field crew is finding out that these houses actually have lead. And that's concerning, isn't it?
It is very concerning, yes.
All right, you have a infant, you have a baby at home. The last thing you want to hear is, what? You said my pipe is non-lead, but it turns out I've been drinking lead water. So the tap cards, the historical records is limited in its accuracy. So we go down this list. Let's see, we look at this sort of the excavation options along with door-to-door inspections. These are, door-to-door inspection would imply that you, instead of, are excavating, you are going to the customer's basement. Now, that's great if you have basements. So if you do like where Aaron and I live, we have basements, you come in, you take a look. Now, it may not be accurate, right? My house, for example, in Cincinnati, it has copper in the basement. However, my lead level is actually very high. It was over 100 parts per billion when I tested it after I bought it. So lead could be in the middle and still contributing. So there's the, I would say, imperfection of the door-to-door inspections. Excavation is usually great, especially we do multi-point inspections. It could get to over 90% in accuracy. So we're looking, let me use a laser pointer here. So we're looking here, right, in the excavations. However, even though they're accurate, they might cost a lot of money. So if we look at $1,000 per house, which is a reasonable number, Aaron, I have seen quotes in the South quoting about $500 per pothole. So that's 2 points. That's the minimum requirement for verifying a house. And that's $1,000. So that's per unknown. That's a lot of money, a lot of time.
Especially if we think back to our two utilities that one started with 20,000 unknowns. If we're going out and trying to do as many excavations as possible, those costs can add up really, really quickly.
Right. Yeah, and also time, right? So we wanted to look at all of them and think strategically, sort of what if we did this? Obviously, excavation is a great tool, right? We're not discarding it at all. We're just saying it has its role, but maybe we need to look at the cost and time. And the reason I think predictive modeling right here on the bottom is very much spoken about is that it boasts a 90% accuracy. That is, if it's done well and done accurately, it could be 80%. And its cost is a fraction, really a fraction of the other methods. So that's why we think predictive modeling can be a great tool for utilities for tackling the unknowns, given, like Aaron said, unknowns would be your burden going forward beyond 2027.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, that accuracy level can be just as high as some of the the most accurate options that you have on this list here, but the cost is just astronomically lower when compared to the excavations, and even comparing to records, which are much more inaccurate, we're still way cheaper than record review.
For sure. Now let's look at what it does, and we'll blast through a few things just to illustrate a point. So my hope is, after seeing this, you have a good idea what predictive modeling is, and have also a good idea, think for yourself, do I want to consider this? So when I started, Aaron, we are both PE, so coming from engineering perspective, predictive modeling sounded like voodoo, right? So I asked my data scientist, our data scientist here, to give me some proof as well. So, but here's how this thing works, and I'll show the proof later. We have this common experience using our phone, right? An iPhone, and you use an iPhone, right?
Yeah,
Aaron?
Apple
Yeah.
iPhone, yeah.
I'm an Android person. We'll settle that later. But either whether it's an iPhone or Android, it shows a picture. Your picture every once in a while in your photo app and saying, "Hi, Aaron, this is you 5 years ago, having a great time." Have you ever wondered how the heck your phone knows that's you?
Yeah, often. I use that feature quite a bit, actually. I have a young child as well, so naturally I have, thousands of photos on my phone from day-to-day adventures. A lot of times I want to search, us at the park, or with my mom or with my wife. So I use the image search quite extensively, and yeah, I
Sure.
often do wonder how that works so well.
I mean, the thing is that it's a similar technology behind predictive modeling. So for every picture, a phone sees it as millions of pixels. Every pixel is a little dot, little dot here. It has a color that is also described by numbers. So every picture is basically a host of numeric values for the computer. What predictive modeling or machine learning generally does is it basically organizes these numbers and uses these numbers to recognize numeric patterns. And these numeric patterns will represent our facial features. And therefore, by that pattern, differentiate my face from Aaron's face, for example. So we need a few things, right, to do this. We need data points. We need a lot of numbers for the model to recognize patterns. And then we need to verify that pattern. And then we can use it to make predictions who that person is on the picture. That's how your phone does it.
Yeah,
I'll switch here to, yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
no, that's a great overview. And I was going to ask if you could maybe extrapolate this to, okay, that's how it works for pictures, but how can we apply this to LCRR and LCRI?
Certainly. If we had pictures of the pipe, we wouldn't be here talking. We're all done. But instead of having pictures, what we do have is that for every household, we have represented here all these values, data points, year build, diameter of pipe. Some of you may already, have seen this, the number of bathrooms even. These values, along with census information, can help the computer form that digital picture, right? It's a digital profile. And then what we need to figure out is whether it's lead or non-lead instead of whose picture this is. So the computer gathers that information, and we need to filter data to inform the model. The model learns, I use air quote, because it's not true, learning, but the model finds the pattern between the lead and non-lead and these numeric values. And once established and tested to be accurate, we use this pattern to make the determination whether it's lead or non-lead. That's why states have approved the use of predictive modeling, and this is how it's done.
Thank you for sharing that. That is really interesting. We mentioned at the top how historical records are sometimes pretty inaccurate, and we even saw, some of the other methods can have that 80 to 90% accuracy range. So how do we know that predictive modeling is as accurate as it's claimed to be? How can we verify that?
We verified, Aaron, by comparing the model's output to some field data. So if it is agreeing to the field, we say the model is correct. I compiled this list of, well, actually, so I asked my data scientist to show me the proof. This is a city in New Jersey. We had some modeling results and field results. I had my data scientist send it to me, really for me to know that this is an accurate method when I tell people. The green dots on the screen are where the model agrees with the field. The red dots are where the model disagrees. So you can see there are a few here and there. But overall, I want you to point your attention to the overall stat here. The model is correct over 90% of the time. And that's why we say, well, we have a tool now that is useful. We can use it for a few purposes, and we'll touch how to use them in a few slides.
Awesome. Yeah, that 94%, that's really exciting to see, and I think it'll probably resonate well with our audience. One question I do have though, we've kind of talked about, all right, non-lead versus lead, but what if I'm a utility that I don't have lead and I don't have GRR? Can I still utilize some of this to help me tackle unknowns, or is it off limits for me?
All right. Well, let's talk about that. Some of you are going to be in that boat, right? So this chart tells you what happens if you don't have lead or galvanized at all in your system. So if you have lead or galvanized, Aaron, obviously we can do predictive modeling, also known as machine learning. If we say we don't, it is true that it's a different approach, but there's still a method. It's called a statistical method. Some of you may have heard of the EAGLE, Michigan EAGLE guidance saying, hey, dig 384 and you will know. So if you have no lead or galvanized, and you field verify at the right locations, a number of them, usually 384 is the magical number, and they all turn out to be non-lead. In many states, you can then go ahead and say, therefore, I infer the remaining of my system is non-lead within a confidence level of 95%. So that is the path forward for somebody who doesn't have lead or galvanized.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that's really important for many municipalities and cities and areas where they know they don't have lead, but the EPA says you have to prove it, right? you have to show that you can't just assume that. So it's gonna be a great way for them to reduce those unknowns and still be cost effective in their approaches. So,
yeah, the key is you have to go to the right locations.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of locations, you mentioned the number in the high 300s is often kind of a magic number for field verifications, or at least a start to it. Can you walk through a little bit more of how many verifications do I have to do to achieve certain accuracy and to kind of iterate on my model and build the best model possible?
Sure thing. I'll quickly go through this. So for a utility, the most important thing to know is we need field verifications even if we're doing predictive modeling. So it's not a node digging method, Aaron. It is some digging. Empirically, we found that to start, a couple of hundred, right? But we should keep running the model sort of in an iterative fashion and hit 20% of the system to be verified. Not that you have to, but empirically, this is a good number to hit and budget for if we want an accurate modeling results. And once you get an accurate model, we're going to use the model really, and for a few things. We probably mostly care about reduce the unknowns in the inventory, and that's true. That certainly can be done. It also could be used to prioritize field inspections, right? I would say, Aaron, like, what are we going to do if we have 20,000 unknowns and then we know some of them are lead? Where do we go replace first? Using a model can guide us to the problematic places first. So if there's lead, get them out first instead of having them waiting. Now, this seems to be, Aaron, like hey, is it a one size fit all? Everybody can do that. Not necessarily. It's a good rule of thumb I want to leave with you as we wrap up predictive modeling. So who can use predictive modeling? Well, it really depends. Your return of investment is dependent on how many unknowns you have. So I usually say if we have less than 3,000, questionable. You may as well just field verify all of them. 3 to 5,000, it's worth a discussion. Your particulars are going to impact whether it's a good method. If you have over 5,000 unknowns, remaining unknowns, we say it's a good method. You certainly should consider it before passing it by and determine to field verify all of your unknowns. Now, with that said, Aaron, there are other things, the unknowns in the inventory. Even if you tackle all the unknowns, there's still possibility of having a lot of work in LCRR. Can you take us there and show us how we can handle the data impact, components and what tools we have to deal with this?
Absolutely. So, like you mentioned, even if we tackle all the unknowns, we still need to kind of compile all this information in the first place, store it, and be able to utilize it, right? So we're going to look here at a little life cycle of an inventory. So we can see starting at the top of the screen, we might be pulling data from different sources. This could be from our GIS, could be from doing records review. And I often think it's best that we bring all this data into one platform that's going to be our kind of home base for everything lead and copper rule. So we're going to talk a little bit about leadCAST as that option, but no matter how you're trying to wrangle this data and manage it all together, I think this workflow is going to still be important and applicable to you because this is what you're going to want out of any system that you use. So as I mentioned at the top, bringing all your data into that one source, reviewing the gaps in your data, figuring out, all right, where am I missing information? Do I have some neighborhoods that I don't know anything about? And you can utilize that insight to kind of prioritize where you're going to go do field verifications. So when you're doing field verifications, this is really one of the ways to tackle unknowns. Obviously, the direct way to tackle unknowns can also help us with building out our future predictive model and iterating on that. But again, you're going to want that information to really flow into the same database that your initial inventory was in. So you can see some of the arrows here on the side kind of alluding to that, right? That this is an iterative process. We're continually building on that same inventory.
Yeah, Aaron, I just heard of this. I thought it's relevant. So I was speaking to utility about doing predictive modeling, and they have their field crew using, a different tool, sending data into Esri, and then using their GIS to send data to us. And in that process, you have 2 steps of formatting the data. And every time when you have, we're talking about thousands of field verifications. So it takes a lot of time to do that. And then we send the results back, right? That's really the downside of having a solution, not having a unified solution for that extra work.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have these disparate solutions that are kind of all over the place, it can be a lot of work just to make those communicate with each other and to move data from one to the other, as you're alluding to. That can be quite the exercise in and of itself. So really highlights the importance of this all-in-one solution. So as we move from field verifications into our predictive model, if that's applicable to you, we can again see how that information all flows together, helps iterate the model faster, and really reduce that time that it takes to build it. After we've done that and we've kind of addressed our unknowns, or we're ready to move into the stage where we're reporting out to the public, perhaps this October, if you're a city large enough to require a public portal and mapping, you can leverage, again, that inventory you built, quickly publish a map from it. In our solution in leadCAST, it's a couple of clicks for the utility to take their inventory and publish it in a way that's consumable to the public and meet the LCRR requirement there. So very important to leverage your data across that whole LCRR, LCRI spectrum. And that starts with field verifications, which we can talk about next. So it's important that, as I mentioned, your inspection data flows directly into your inventory. Of course, you're going to want that to be verified first before it goes in and changes anything from non-lead to lead or vice versa. So in our tool in leadCAST, we do have built-in QA/QC procedures to assist in that. But one thing I really want to highlight with this mobile tool is the ability to not just do inspections, but to also collect other relevant information while your inspector is out there in the field. So the inspector, they might be figuring out what the line is, but if it's lead, they might want to go ahead and collect a right of entry form or replacement agreement while they're out there. So our tool has the ability to do that. And again, assign it with that property and really put all that data together so that we don't have to go back out there in a few months when we're going to do the replacement.
And it could be another field paper, like paper sheet, right? The right of entry, usually that's how it's signed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the ability to do that through the app, really streamline that whole process, and also log all of communications, which, as I mentioned, is important in LCRI. So flowing all that in field inspection data into the tool is important, but so is flowing information from your public and distributing information to the public. So having a public portal that leverages your inventory can really aid in getting your public map out there, meeting that LCRR requirement, and also collecting information from your residents and really mobilizing them to be inspectors for you. One of the utilities that we're working with, I think you'll appreciate this. They're giving out water bill credits for every resident that submits a material investigation on their own through our application. They get a nice little discount on their bill. And they've had pretty good success with that. I like that. I wish my utility was doing that. I'd be able to save a little money this month. But
yeah, I always joke with utilities, maybe send some Chick-fil-A cards out. People love them.
Absolutely. So, I think it's a great way to engage with your residents, though. Let them know that you are working on this rule and that you're committed to it, and have them be a part of the process. And it also saves you a little bit of money, because we saw at the top of when we were talking about predictive modeling that sending somebody to do a basement inspection is about $70. So if you give them a bill credit that's less than that, you're still saving money and getting more responses and building that inventory out. So it's a great way to engage your residents and start to track that information with how you're communicating with them, which is another important part of LCRI, which is tracking that communication. If you want to go there, Da. Yes. So once we have built out that inventory and we're ready to do our replacements, we have to get in touch with the resident to do that replacement, right? We need to schedule it, get access to their property, all of these things to go ahead and replace their line with a new non-lead line. The EPA says we have to reach out to residents at least 4 times through a couple of different media. And you, of course, need to be able to track that so that you know where you're at in that process with each resident. So this is something we've built into our tool. We call it our touch point tracking. And it lets you see, all right, how many times have I reached out to this property owner? Are they responding positively or negatively towards doing a replacement? Perhaps they don't want one. If they don't, we can log that reason and have that all in a defensible audit trail kind of way, so that we can submit it to our state agency if needed and have that data to rely on. So it's really a great way to log all that.
I love it.
Yes. So again, speaking of replacements, once we've perhaps reached out to that customer and they say, yeah, I do want to go ahead and go forth with this replacement, we need a way to track all of that information, make sure that all of our data is, again, quality in this arena. So we have a tool, which you see here kind of being walked through, that lets your contractors out in the field take some images of the property before they do any replacement activity. So that kind of existing state of the property. I'm sure you've seen, on Facebook or Nextdoor, somebody probably saying, hey, the utility came to my house and messed up my flower bed or something like that, right?
I do know one who actually ran into this.
Yeah. So this is kind of gives you that defensible audit trail, I guess, or proof that hey, that flower bed was already messed up. You know, my workers didn't do that. It was the petunias were already dying. So we collect that pre-replacement inspection and also a post-replacement inspection, which I kind of think of that as the peace of mind for the utility that hey, that contractor, they went out there, they really did put in a nice new shiny copper line. It's the correct size. You know, everything looks good in terms of the quality of the workmanship. It's following our specifications and meeting what we're looking for. And of course, again, we do have built-in QA/QC procedures for the utility to approve or deny all of these forms. So
Yeah,
we've kind of
thank
gone
you,
over
Aaron.
a lot of aspects today. Vidal, do you want to give us a quick recap on what we've talked about?
Yeah, sure thing. Just maybe the one way to recap is this. I've sat in a meeting, one of the proactive utilities in Florida, and there's a very active member there who made a spreadsheet to track all of these things. I saw that spreadsheet. I think it has about 60 columns rolling from one side to another, 45-day notice, flushing instructions, and all that. So basically, I think for all-in-one solution, it replaces that rolling spreadsheet and takes care of things in a data-centric way. But let's do this. We have a few minutes left. We talked a lot about things. We went through the unknowns and why it is a critical component. You want to minimize that. We went through how predictive modeling could be the best tool, right, Aaron, to handle that. And you have taking us through the all-in-one solution and why it could be a good idea. I mean, when you look for a solution, right, look for these components. You might want to consider them. Let's do this. Let's type in the Q&A. We have a few questions to get us a head start. Use the Q&A button to type in your questions. If we can answer them all, we will, of course, reach out and answer them afterwards. At the same time, Jay, can you launch this poll? Love to hear from you, right, how this helps you and where you're thinking for your next steps.
Happy to. Thank you, Da. Thank you, Aaron, for the great discussion here today. The poll is up now, and so folks can go ahead and submit their responses or a Q&A question if you have them in the audience here.
Sure. Thank you, Jay. I got a few questions here to get us started. So one of them is, the cost of predictive modeling. Isn't the model input based on records review? I don't see how cost of model could be less than records review, since to create a model, you first need records. So our modeling actually is not dependent on the data from the records, since the records may not be accurate. Modeling is based on field verifications. So you're right, the modeling cost would have to be added to the field cost for that component. So the cost we showed is just for the predictive modeling, right? Not considering the field verification. Thank you for that question. Second is the 20% verification 20% of the total connections or unknowns? It's the 20% of the unknowns. The knowns are not considered the scope of the field verification or predictive modeling. I have a question here. Aaron, maybe you can help with this one. Does cutting off somebody's water require a minor disturbance?
Yeah, so if you're shutting off their water, that will meet the disturbance criteria. So you'll have to, again, do that, reaching out to them, providing the education materials on lead disturbance and potentially flushing of the lines.
Okay. Oh, there's a very good question. I don't know if we can finish that, but can you explain the difference between classifying a line as galvanized and galvanized requiring replacement?
Yeah.
Aaron, can you help?
Absolutely. So for galvanized versus galvanized requiring replacement, first off, they're both obviously galvanized lines. But the requiring replacement aspect is if that line has ever been downstream of a lead line, it will be requiring replacement. So if you had, a lead line and then that was connected to a galvanized line and the lead was where the water flowed through first, that galvanized line is now GRR, galvanized requiring replacement. And I kind of think of this as a guilty until proven innocent sort of scenario. So you need to be able to prove for each galvanized line that that's never been downstream of a lead line, or else it will be GRR. So
Thank you, Aaron. We're at time. We want to be respectful of your time. Jay, can you conclude the poll for us?
Yeah, happy to, Da. We had a lot of really great responses, and some folks who are definitely interested in looking into predictive modeling amongst some of the other categories here too. So thank you everybody for participating.
Sure thing. Thank you all.
thanks.